Hello everybody, welcome back to the Dually Build series. Today we're going to be doing something completely different, and I'm taking this video in kind of like a different direction. I know it's a pain in the ass waiting for videos and whatnot, so I think what I'm going to do is try to keep you guys as up to date as possible when it comes to fabricating stuff. I think what I'll do is I'll post this video in like 2 or 3 different parts, getting it all put together, assembled, and painting it and whatnot. Just so you guys have content and everything's entertaining. It's fun, you guys get to watch the process. I personally enjoy the fabrication process. I like watching this kind of stuff, so maybe you guys will too. Either way, what I'm doing is removing the bumper, and then I'm gonna be using cardboard to mock up everything, using duct tape and stuff like that. It's gonna look super ghetto, but trust me, it works really well. And occasionally I'll chime in and talk about certain things as I'm doing stuff like this, and try to do a good job of me explaining as to why I'm doing these things in certain ways. So that way, if you're interested in doing this part yourself, that you kind of understand why I'm doing it, or if something doesn't exactly make sense, or like why would you do this instead of this, maybe it'll explain that. So either way, start kind of mocking everything up. One thing I wasn't expecting was the fact that this is actually made out of steel. Was not expecting that. As soon as I picked it up, I was like, it's not plastic. Let's take a look at our mounts here. So, the mounts here and here on both sides. I mean, I could always take these plates off and make my own. Okay, so kind of just put the OEM grill back on to see how our lines are, what lines we need to follow. So it's gonna have to come down here, drop down, then go across, and come up, and then drop down again. So now I know how much of an angle we need. Now, what I'm going to be doing is using cardboard to kind of measure and pre-cut the pieces that I need. I'll assemble them all using like essentially tape and hot glue, cut the pieces out of the cardboard, assemble the bumper the way I want it to out of the cardboard, and then once I'm kind of happy with everything, I will use the cardboard. I'll take it all apart as a template, draw it along the sheet metal, cut it out with a plasma cutter, tack it all together, and then yeah, that's how I want it to work. So I guess I'm just gonna be going back and forth measuring and drawing. Alright, so I did kind of take a different approach on this. I did want to talk about it briefly. I've looked at a lot of these bumpers online, and I don't think there's anything wrong with them. There's a bunch of different bumpers out there for sale. A lot of them are good, a lot of them are different, to say the least. But I really took this opportunity as like I wanted to make my own bumper. I wanted to do my own fabrication stuff, and I like anything that gives me the ability to learn, because like this is something that I really enjoy doing, and I really enjoy making and doing things. So I started looking at these bumpers online, and I decided that I didn't really feel like paying thousands of dollars. Some of these bumpers go for $2 grand. That's without any options on them. You know, no winch, no lights, none of this stuff. And I'm not saying anything's wrong with that, because obviously there's a lot of time and effort putting into research and developing and assembling. I learned this, right? Like this is not an easy process. I wanted to use this as an experience to learn how to do stuff, and I really enjoy making stuff. So I looked at the bumpers online. I figured out which one that I kind of like the styling of. I like the things about certain ones, and I like certain things. And I started kind of making a similar design based on the ones that I seen that I really like. So using cardboard, I actually measured out how wide it needed to be and figured out where I wanted to stop. And using a couple of guesses, a couple of eye measurements, I was able to figure out where I wanted to start, where I wanted to stop, and then I basically use the cardboard, cut it out to appropriate measurements to make sure that everything is gonna match up on both sides, and then kind of all put it together with duct tape and hot glue. And I know this looks ghetto, I know this seems like a really strange way of doing things, but this is actually something that a lot of fabricators use, whether it be cardboard or poster board or like even a thinner wood. I think that wood probably would have been a better option, just using like a thinner wood, maybe like a thin composite poster board of some sort, would have made a great option for this. However, I have a bunch of cardboard boxes from buying stuff online, and it just made more sense to do it this way. So I used the cardboard to kind of figure out at least one side of how I wanted everything to go together. Taped it all together, and then the idea was to take it all apart, then draw all the shapes on the piece of sheet metal that I have, cut it out using the plasma cutter, tack it all together, make sure everything fits right, then you know, lay full-blown beads and have a front bumper. So that was just kind of the thought process on this. This is something I've never done before. This is outside of my comfort zone. This is outside of my general knowledge, and I had to do a lot of learning to get this to happen. However, do I think that the average guy with a welder and a plasma cutter can do this? Hell yes, I do. I think that anybody could do this. If I can get this far, you definitely can. All right, so now I'm kicking on the plasma cutter. This thing is so much fun to use. I won't even lie about that. This thing has been absolutely a joy to use. I cannot believe I waited so long to get a plasma cutter. Basically, I'm doing a really careful job as to making sure all my measurements are 100% accurate. I found that if I use a metal guide, whether it be the ruler or just a piece of steel that I have laying around, and put that exactly at 1/4 of an inch from my draw line, I will make my cut exactly in the middle of the line. So I take a lot of time during this whole process to make sure that I'm exactly 1/8 of an inch from the dead center of my draw line to where I'm gonna be cutting. That way all my measurements match up. If you're doing stuff like this, it's always very important to make sure you know exactly where and why you're cutting certain things. One of the problems I've always had in the past is I'll make a draw line and then, you know, sometimes I'll cut on the outside of that draw line, sometimes I'll cut on the inside of the draw line, sometimes I'll cut in the middle. I get super inconsistent cuts, things don't end up matching very well. With this, I was taking it a lot more seriously. I was making sure that my measurements are super accurate. So even after tracing everything, I went back with the ruler, made sure all the measurements made sense, did a really good job of drawing it on the piece of metal so that way I have a reference point, and I made sure to cut in the exact same place according to the ruler on every piece of material that I cut, which makes sure that everything is going to line up exactly how I want it to and everything's gonna be as consistent as possible. So I had a really, really good fit on everything just by taking some extra time. For me, when it comes to making certain things, it's not something I've ever taken to too much consideration, but since this is all piece by piece like Legos, I wanna make sure everything fit as perfect as possible with as minimal gaps. So I ended up getting a really good fit by doing this. So now I'm tacking everything together with the welder. I didn't worry about the angles too much because I'm treating the spot welds as almost like a hinge system. So basically I'm just using it to hold it in place, and then I kind of bend it forward a little bit, and once I set my angles exactly how far or how narrow I want everything to be, I'll put a couple more beads in there and lock it in place. But this still allows me to get my angles correct because I don't have my angle finder with me, so I don't know exactly what degree of bend I want just yet. These little magnets that I'm using actually have both a 90 and a 45 degree bend, and I did need a 90 but over course of 2 radiuses. So I use the magnets first to create a 45 degree bend, and then eventually another 45 degree bend that gives me the 90 degrees, which allows this bumper to mount flush and straight at a 90 degree angle. So just kind of tacking everything together still allows me to bend things until it's all in the right place, and then eventually when I go to lay some more beads, it'll hold it in place. But again, I'm just using these tacks as almost like hinges to where I can kind of bend the metal and get my angles exactly how I want them. Alright, actually this is coming along quite nicely, a lot better than I thought it was going to be. So obviously they're just kind of all tacked together right now. There's still a lot of jiggle and room for mounting and stuff. I cut these extra long, really not for any reason, I just didn't feel like trimming them exactly. I wanted to be able to make sure that they all lined up good, so I'll trim this part here and cut this in a little bit here, and then I'll put some light bars here or whatever. I still have to cut out a spot right here because there is a transmission cooler directly behind this, so I'll have to mark that off. But now I've got to make a piece for this gap here. Doing this, I usually take a piece of material and try to stick it behind it and then draw my design on it, convert it to measurements, and then translate that to paper. So I've got to do it for here and then I'll just make sure that it's the exact same over here before I even make those cuts, but should be relatively close. I've measured these all within, I think I ended up like sneezing or moving, so I did actually end up messing up this little gap here, but I'll fill that with weld, and then once you sand it and smooth and everything like that, it'll all look like one uniform shape. I'm not worried about that at all. Dude, this thing is gonna be so gnarly. I'm gonna save a good bit of money on this thing when I'm done with it. And I will probably end up trimming the final length of this. I actually just went a little bit longer than I thought that I would want. It's better to have more material than you need, because then you can always trim it later. You don't want to do too little and then be stuck without it. So yeah, so I get a little bit thinner of a bumper as far as like length. That way my approach angle is still nice and tall, and I've got a nice, almost like skid plate to it, you know? And dude, this thing is gonna be so cool. I'm very happy with the way it's turning out so far, considering the amount of time that I put into it. That piece right there. I won't lie, I've done a lot of random, I guess, fabricating over the couple of years. However, never anything quite like this. Looks like she'll work for the other side too. So, looks like we've got a really nice tempa latte. Yep, cool. Cut them and weld them. All right, I'm going to tag this last little bit together, and I'm going to call it a night and on this video too. Oh yeah, it's not even, well, to be honest, it's not even really held on. Fuck, that's heavy. Oh, and it's hot. All right, guys, like I said, I'm calling it now. Got that one to fit really good. However, I think I cut this one just a little bit too wide for the piece that I was using, so I'll get that in the next video. But it's actually coming together quite well. Right now, it's just all tacked together, obviously, but really no tension, no weird spots. Once we get it all tacked together, I will do the mounts on the back, trim the bumper up. Like I said, I'll probably follow this line here, trim the excess here. Still got a couple more mounts to make. Got to cut spaces for lights, fog lights, whatever. Got to cut holes for light bars, tow hooks. Got to put tow hooks in the front. I'll probably reinforce that with the 1/2 inch or maybe the 1/4 inch thick steel, but I'll be using the 1/4 inch thick to make my mounts. This is 1/4 inch thick steel. So yes, get ready for part 2 coming at you guys probably like Tuesday. Adios.